Hi everyone, I'm just back from Europe and it's the rainy season now in Yunnan. So let's take a look at our storehouse at the second floor of our tea shop. So you can come with me. This is where we process all the orders, and this is our main storage of Pu-erh cakes here. And since it's raining, it's quite important to think about the humidity and the storage conditions of the cake. You know that Pu-erh has a very nice, very mild natural climate, and usually the teas are not at risk of turning moldy. But sometimes if you have a sustained rain episode, like sometimes it can rain for a week without stopping basically, so at this time it can be a bit risky and you can smell it in the air. So the first thing when you enter these kind of warehouses is you smell the air and you just check if the smell is normal or not, if it smells a bit moldy or not. Then you can take some cakes like this, you can touch the cake and you get a feel for the paper, you get used to feeling the humidity on the paper. Then you can smell it, and if it's well stored, it should have a strong tea smell. If it doesn't smell at all, usually it means that the storage is too dry. It means your tea is not really actively aging, which can be common in the winter or during the dry season wherever you are. And during the wet season, you need to feel that activity, that smell, but it shouldn't be. It shouldn't smell moldy like in a basement or an attic. But of course we can be a bit more scientific than this, because okay, let's imagine you smell some moldiness here. What do? You're going to use a dehumidifier. We used to use a very small one. We used to run this one without any specific strategy during the rainy season, but it wasn't really the best. It wasn't really the smartest thing to do, because anyway it's a very small dehumidifier, which can be enough for your house. But here we have about 100 square meters by 3 meters, so about 300 cubic meters of space that we need to control. Now we have some. You can see we have some little weather stations. You know, they give you the temperature and the humidity mainly, and they are related, they are linked by Bluetooth. Of course, when you take it, usually the humidity increases, but it was at 71. And now I have a test. You see, I've taken one of the cakes, a random cake here, put it in a sealed pouch, and waited for about 1 hour, and it gives me a reading of 69 for this one. So what happens here? By doing this, I measure the equilibrium relative humidity in the cake, the ERH, and it gives me a reading of the water content inside the cake. Okay, you can imagine that it's not very convenient to measure how much water is in the cake, but we can easily measure the ERH, the equilibrium relative humidity, because you just put the cake in a tight environment with the hygrometer, and you get the reading after maybe 1 hour would be safe, you could say. And because you can imagine that this Pu-erh cake is like a sponge. Actually, it will suck in the moisture from the air, or it will release it. Okay, and so I can show you now, because since that dehumidifier was not really suitable for such a big space, we bought a big one like this. You can see. So this one has a good capacity, and it can easily remove the moisture in such a space. Okay. Now the problem is here, we need to open the door because we have employees working here, and we need to renew the air. We don't have a sophisticated air conditioning here. So what can we do? We can only run it during the evening, and during the day we open the door. So of course the humidity in the air will change as soon as we open the door. We will get the natural humidity coming in. And the natural humidity apparently here today is just like 71% apparently. But when it's raining, it can go up to 90%. And so you want to avoid your tea being in contact with such humid air for a long time. But actually, when you measure the humidity in the air, you don't measure directly the water content, the moisture content in the cake. Okay, you can imagine the wet air is a buffer, and the water in the air will be slowly taken in by the cake. Okay, so if you have a 90% air in the short term, it's not catastrophic for your tea, it's not a problem. But if you have a 90% air for a month, that will be a problem, because your cakes will take in the water, and then mold will be allowed to develop. So the question now is, how are we going to use this dehumidifier, knowing that we need to open the door every day during the day? Now, we can first calculate how much, when we close the door, how much water do we have in the air. And if the temperature is 30 degrees Celsius, we'll get 30 grams of water per cubic meter. And we said we had 300 cubic meter. So that we have 300 cubic meter of air here. So that's about 9,000 gram of water. So 9 liter of water. But of course, we probably have a bit less than 300 cubic meter, because that's the surface when there's nothing in the room. But here we have some things in the room. And but on the other hand, the airflow, there might be still a slight airflow. It's not perfectly sealed. So let's assume we have 900 cubic meter when the humidity is 100%, of course. So for example, if the humidity is at 66%, we will have only 6 kilograms of water in the air. And so so you can think like this: how much water is in the air in total, and how much water do we collect here? So in a way, first we need to extract the water from the air, and this will be a pretty quick process. And then you can come in, and we will be extracting the water from these cakes. Okay, but it's kind of a flow system. Okay, it happens at the same time, so you'd need like differential equations to really solve that. But we don't really need to do the calculation. We just need to understand how it works. So you suck in the water from the air, and that will put a pressure that will extract the water from the cakes. Okay, so let's go back to our reading of here. This is the reading we get today. We get 69, and we said we're aiming at an ERH of 70%, which is the optimum, in our opinion, to store tea in a dry way, but age it as fast as possible without any moldy taste or wet storage characteristic. So we're actually very good with this kind of moisture now. Okay, so we're fine. Actually, it means that these days we don't need to operate our dehumidifier. And when it will start raining, then maybe we'll have some 80-90% air for a couple of days. But it doesn't mean we will need to be operating that dehumidifier at that time, because if we get like 90% air for just one day, maybe that will be just fine. The cakes won't be that affected. They will, for one day, be taking in some water. And at the end of this day, maybe we can just take another random cake from here, like this Bangwai small trees, and we can do this test. And if we see that the ERH here is above 70%, well, of course, we can repeat maybe for a couple of cakes. If we see that the cakes are too wet, then we can run the dehumidifier for some time until we find that the cakes are dry enough. So yeah, you don't have to worry that much about short changes in relative humidity in the air, because there's a big buffering capacity, you could say, in the cakes, and they will take some time to take in the water or to release some water. And so yeah, so we just control that. Of course, with experience, you can just touch, especially when you have mylar, when you have loose leaf tea. I don't know if I have some here, but when you touch the loose leaf tea, maybe we can go there and try to find some mylar somewhere. When you have the loose leaf tea, you can more easily check. Here I have some, and you see, when you press it like this one is slightly moist, because when I crush it, I press it, it doesn't break. I can feel I can put a lot of strength without crushing it. So yeah, this one is just okay, I would say. I don't even know what this is, but it smells pretty good. So yeah, so that's about it. You don't need to run the dehumidifier all the time, and it can actually be dangerous, because if you think you want to do your job well and constantly run this dehumidifier at like 40%, in the long run, your cakes will be at 30% ERH, equilibrium, and they will get bone dry. So you have to be careful when manipulating this parameter, the humidity. Or ideally you want to live in an area in which you don't need to manipulate that, and the natural storage is very good. And that's basically the case in Pu-erh city. Outside, some like a couple of weeks, maybe every year, during which it's important to run this dehumidifier. So that's about it. Today I'm gonna go to Jingmai, so I hope you're having a nice end of the summer, and we can always keep talking about storing these tea cakes. But just to remind you, if you're at home, if you don't have many cakes, you don't need to worry at all. Just keep it in the mylar bag at a nice relative humidity, and they will age very fine. Thank you for watching, and see you later. Bye bye.